Hey folks, this is a bit of whole class feedback for the new higher media class. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to go through the tasks from the first bit of role of media work that I gave you the other week. So you can kind of sit with your answers and compare and contrast to what I'm saying about the tasks. I am still going to give you individual feedback for the people who submitted their work to Teams or emailed it to me, so thank you for that. Just a few notes before I get started on that issue. I know that some people are struggling to access the feedback on Teams. I know that some people are able to get it, so I think it's in the right place for you. What I'm going to be doing this afternoon is looking to either find or make a short video showing you how to get into it, so that if you're having a sort of specific problem that needs troubleshooted, then we can sort of get that sorted for you so that you can access your feedback really easily. Second of all, the Crash Hire Teams is still there for people who want to get involved with that. I posted the access code earlier in the feed on our Teams page. So if you scroll up, you'll get it. So this is a team for the people who are doing Hire and didn't do the Nat 5. And I've already posted 2 tasks. There'll be a third one coming soon. There'll be 7 in total, 7 tasks that reflect the 7 key aspects of National 5 Media. So it's not the whole course, but it's enough to give you a grounding. Once you've joined the team, new assignments will appear there for you. If you're just joining, the first 2 assignments, or the first 3, depending on when you join, will be in the files section at the top, so you can still access it through there, and then you can't submit it to Teams, but you could email it to me. I think it's really valuable to give that a go. Okay, so I'm going to go through these tasks, and then you can, like I said, compare and contrast to what it is that you've written. So the first thing that I asked you to do was have a little look at this issues grid, where I was sort of separated into 4 sections, different concerns people would have from the world of media. So media use, as I mentioned at the top there, by state, corporations, organisations, groups and individuals. So what kind of issues do people have with the content of the media, how the media institutions conduct themselves, how they behave, the user concerns, so like what people who use the media are concerned about, and then the media concerns, so the people who work in the media, what are their concerns. What I'd asked you to do was to pick one from, or at least one from each column, and sort of explain what it was. I circled and read the ones that I thought you could actually probably answer without much research. You'd probably be able to tell me that from general knowledge what these things are. So just very quickly, I'm going to go through the 4 columns and just go through every single one of them, just quite quickly, so that whatever one you went for, you'll kind of get a sense of whether or not you were on the right track with it. So in terms of content effects, so that's to do with, if someone engages with media content, what effects might that have on them? What might people do after they've consumed something? Offensive or inflammatory content. So will anyone complain? Will anyone be offended by the media content? Is it going to hurt the people involved in any way? So that's something you'd be concerned about. Commercialization is just to do with how do we make money? Can it make money? Does it have commercial appeal and commercial opportunities and potential? Dumbing down, that's to do with oversimplification of something, so does this media content oversimplify something very serious, therefore reducing the public conversation around it to something too basic? Accuracy and bias, so is the content truthful and does it have an agenda behind it? Spin and propaganda, is the content being used for a political purpose for some reason? Is it being spun to fit a narrative for a politician? And secrecy is to do with whether there's anything in the content that is questionable in terms of whether the public should have access to it. So conduct, that's to do with how the sort of media behave, I suppose. So first of all, invasion of privacy. There's a reasonable expectation that the media will leave you alone. So how much of your privacy is invaded by the media? So that tends to come up as an argument when we look at sort of public figures who are maybe besieged by paparazzi. Misuse of information, or now we'd probably say misuse of data. So that's a human rights violation, an issue of, are the media taking data and using it against you in any way? So you'll know that in the last couple of years, you maybe seen stories about people's Facebook data or their Twitter data being used to sell them stuff, or maybe even to try and target them for adverts for political campaigns and things like that. source-reporter relationship. So this is this idea that it's an ethical issue, that the reporter, the journalist, should protect their source of information if the information that they've given the journalist could potentially harm them. So people who are maybe called whistleblowers, like the first person who worked in the tobacco industry, for example, who said, sorry, but this smoking might actually be bad for people. That's someone who's a whistleblower, someone who's within the organisation who blows the whistle and tells people something bad's happening here. So the source-reporter relationship's about that idea that reporters should be protective of their source and make sure they don't come to any harm. Journalistic ethics, journalists are supposed to seek the truth and report it and not distort any of the information. Obviously, you may say that many journalists do not adhere to these ethical rules. So it's a debate worth having. And concentration of media in a few hands, that relates to your second task, actually, which will either already be on Teams or is about to be on Teams, depending on when you watch this. So what happens when our media content is controlled ultimately at the top by maybe 2 or 3 companies, and it's not something that people are aware of? Like, someone might watch a news story on TV and then read something online, and they come from 2 different sources, but they're actually all owned by the same company at the top. So people might not understand that the message they're getting could be quite biased. User concerns. So equal access. Can everybody who needs access to something get that access? Overload too much of something. Are we screen time, for example, is a big debate around an overload of media. Online conduct, that's really to do with rules and behaviours. A lot of this stuff maybe feeds a little bit more into social media. So how people behave online. Online conduct maybe feeds into things like trolling, etc., where you hide behind a kind of fake Twitter handle and spread lies or libel about someone. So alongside that is online privacy. So is there is there good security in terms of what you're doing online? Nobody else should be able to see that or access it. And can you use your credit cards, for example, safely? Online safety is slightly different to security. So that's where we're concerned about vulnerable people, so children and teens and some adults as well, and the kind of stuff that they're exposed to online. Like, is the online world that they're negotiating and travelling through safe for them? Content quality is the stuff that we're watching and consuming good quality. That could be, is it good in terms of entertainment? Is it a 5-star entertainment experience? Or it can be, is this news of good quality? Does it come from a reliable source? Has it been vetted and checked? Is it fake news? So obviously these are things that a lot of people think have deteriorated a great deal in the last few years. Diversity of content, are we making sure there's no bubble? So are there lots of different voices, lots of opinions, lots of point of views in our media? Or are we pretty much getting one biased point of view on something and that's all we're exposed to? So is there a diversity in the content? Media concerns, lastly. So these are the things that the media themselves might be concerned about. So copyright, do they own the copyright to something, therefore they can make money from it? Monetization of content, how do we make money from everything that we can? So that's what a media company wants to do. They don't want anything on their books that they can't monetize. The decline of traditional media is something that they're worried about. You'll maybe know yourself, the number of people reading newspapers and magazines has declined quite a great deal in the last 20 years. So how do media companies react to that? How do they make sure that even though people aren't buying newspapers and are not buying magazines, how do the companies still engage a readership? How do they still make money? Regulatory or legal compliance. So for those that did Nat 5 last year, this is the kind of thing that would be related to Ofcom or the BBFC. So Ofcom are the regulatory board for television, and the BBFC, the British... I've had a total mind blank. The BBFC, the British Board for Film Classifications. Oofed. I should edit that out, but I'm not gonna. So they're the people that put the age ratings on films. So when you're putting out a media product, you've got to make sure that you meet the regulations and legal requirements before you do so. Like, a film can't screen in the UK in a cinema without the BBFC certificate in front of it. So you've got to make sure you comply with those rules. And then state and corporate interference. So the state is, just think of that as like the government. So are the government going to interfere in our media product in some way? Is there corporate interference? So if we are owned by a big multinational conglomerate at the very top of the chain, what kind of influence will they have on the newspaper that they own right down at the very bottom? So that was a lot of information to take in, but hopefully it made quite a bit of sense to you. So the next part, task 2, was to just define these terms. Just going to make sure I've got my notes here for this. So part A defining the company purposes, a media company purposes. So think about the three P's: profit, promotion, or public service. Are they the only purposes? No, but they are the three main ones, and I'm pretty sure all other purposes could maybe be branched off from these. So profit, promotion, public service. Part B, audience needs: entertainment, education, information. Are they the only three? No, but I think everything branches off from those three things. Attitudes and behaviours: intentional or unintentional. So when someone consumes a media product, what are the intentional attitudes and behaviours that come away from it? So for example, when someone sees an advert on TV, they're everywhere, you've probably seen them yourself, the adverts encouraging people to stay alert and wash your hands and all that kind of stuff, all these public service films that are put on the television because of the coronavirus. The intentional attitude and behaviour is that people will follow those rules and do what the advert says. The unintentional behaviour would maybe be people who reject that message and disagree with it and want to there was what do you call it? There was large gatherings of people in Glasgow, for example, over the well, wasn't that large, but it was planned to be large. Protests against this kind of lockdown period that we're in. So that's obviously not that's the unintentional effect of those adverts. That's not what the people who made it wanted to happen. So the last three things, D, E, and F, all kind of tie together. So a conservative with a small c, not the political party. A conservative view of the media would be the very traditional version of the media, which we saw back here, actually. So you saw Helen Lovejoy there from The Simpsons. Won't somebody please think of the children? So this kind of idea where we have to uphold family values because of the media and be very careful in the types of stuff that we put on television that young people could be exposed to, for example. So that's a conservative view of the media, is quite traditional. The neoliberal view of the media, I kind of think of this as the capitalist view, where a neoliberal point of view would be that media companies, their responsibility is to the people who own the company and the shareholders to make them money. The responsibility is not to the public. Whereas if a liberal view of the media would be the public service view, that the media companies are responsible to society, they're responsible to the people, and that they should serve the people. So the kind of liberal and neoliberal views kind of clash, for example, over an issue like the BBC. So BBC is funded by the television licence fee. Neoliberal point of view would be scrap the licence fee. The BBC should be subscription based. People should opt in if they want it, like Sky TV. And that way it can make money, it'll have adverts. Public service, a liberal view of the media would say absolutely not. The BBC has to remain this unbiased, impartial entity that's run for the people. Obviously, lots of debates there that we could have in the future about whether or not the BBC really is unbiased and serves the public. Lots of people think it isn't, which you could research if you wanted to. Okay, so audience theories was the next thing. So this came straight from the Nat 5 course last year. So for those people, they'll know what this is, and for the new people, it's a learning curve. But I asked you to define and explain these three things: negotiated, preferred, and oppositional readings. So a negotiated reading is when the audience accepts some of the things in the text but rejects others. So whatever it is that the person who's made the media text wants them to believe, they've accepted some things and rejected other ones. Preferred is where they respond to the text exactly how the producer wants them to. And the oppositional reading is where they understand what the preferred reading is, but they reject it and say no. So, for example, last year for National 5, we watched a documentary made by the very liberal-minded filmmaker Michael Moore called Fahrenheit 9/11, and basically he made the film to try and stop the then President George W. Bush from being re-elected. So the negotiated reading for an audience, because all three can exist at the same time, the negotiated reading would be an audience who watches it and kind of goes, well, we agree that he's not great, but we're still going to vote for him. We agree with this stuff, but we disagree with some of the other things you've said about him. A preferred reading is someone who would obviously watch Fahrenheit 9/11 and say, Yep, 100%. I'm not voting for this guy. You're right. He's awful. And then the oppositional reading would be, I've seen what you're trying to say about him, but you have liberal bias, Michael Moore, and I will still vote for this person. So it changes text by text what these kind of three different things are, but we'll return to that when we look at specific texts together in the future. The next task I gave you is a sort of little case study of Nigel Farage and his appearances on BBC Question Time. And whether we thought this increase in appearances in the media would influence his popularity or the UKIP popularity. So for part A, I'd ask you, like, do you think the increase helped, hindered, or made no difference to the support of UKIP? And you could argue for all three. There's no fixed answer here. So you could say that it helped because increasing his platform and time on television would have promoted more of his ideas, more people would have seen and heard him talk and therefore had more opportunity to agree with him and perhaps support the party. It could also hinder support because the more you see of someone, sometimes the less you agree with them. So the more he was on TV, the kind of more it would have reinforced a negative opinion. And people said, no, I definitely don't agree with this guy. I've seen him 10 times now. And it gets worse every time. And then made no difference. Some people might have avoided that and kind of said, well, no, obviously it's going to make a difference. But you have to think in different directions here because obviously he's on BBC Question Time. How many people watch Question Time? What are the viewing figures like? What about the people that don't watch it? So did it make a difference? Yes, but it may have made no difference for the people that don't watch that programme. So there's different ways we've got to kind of attack these ideas from different points of view. And then part B, I asked you, like, why do you think that the BBC, public service broadcaster, were keen to have Nigel Farage on the Question Time show? And I asked you to think about purposes, audience needs, and your own knowledge of him. So first of all, as a public service broadcaster, it's up to the BBC to try and display a range of voices and opinions. That's what they're there to do. They are supposed to say, like, this is a variety. Some people think they don't do that and that they lean a certain way more often than not. But so from their point of view, they may have argued that, like, we had this guy on because we know that he represents a point of view in the country. There's also a little bit of a cult of personality at play here with him because whether you agree with him or disagree with him, in some ways he's such a kind of unique figure that people gain something entertainment-wise from him. So entertainment doesn't always necessarily mean to be a positive thing. So think about if you have someone on social media you follow that you would say is a hate follow. It's someone that you're like, I detest this person, but I can't help but I want to see what rubbish they're going to come out with next. So even people who don't like him may tune in because they would have gained some type of entertainment from being like, I hate him, and then people would have been entertained because they agreed with him. So there's different ways to interpret entertainment. Agreement or outrage. Okay, so the next thing was to do with the newspapers and the coverage of Harry and Meghan stepping back as senior royals. So I asked you to look at these three newspaper front pages: Guardian, New York Post, and the Daily Mail. And first of all, I asked you to tell me what different ideas they're promoting about this news story about Harry and Meghan leaving the UK. I'm thinking about images and word choice and the headlines. So the Guardian, if you look at it just above me there, it seems fairly balanced. Like, the language is quite benign. Harry and Meghan to step back as senior royals. The picture of them, they're smiling. Again, there doesn't really, it seems to be quite a balanced thing. It's just news. Here's just a bit of news. The New York Post, they create this Megxit portmanteau to try and play on Brexit. And they have a kind of cartoon where they've photoshopped Harry and Meghan's faces onto these kind of commoners. If you look at the subheading, it says at the top there, Meghan and Harry leave royals for commoner life. So, he's sitting in his pants with a stain on his vest, and she's got her hair rollers in and things like that. So it's kind of making fun of it. It's a bit gossipy. And finally, the Daily Mail, same picture to the Guardian, but the headline reveals a much more sort of outraged idea. So fury, the Queen's fury. Think about the word choice there. Harry and Meghan, we quit. And then in the subheading at the top, it says, dramatically step down without, in capital letters, telling Her Majesty. So a very different point of view there. A much more kind of horrified point of view. The second part of the task is I asked you, what do they want you to do or think? So what are the kind of unintentional or intentional behaviours and attitudes that the paper is trying to promote? So The Guardian seems to just want you to take it as news. They're just like, this is just the news of the day. The Guardian have their own biases, but the royal family and news related to them doesn't really seem to be one that they're going to expose here. The New York Post, they want you to laugh and maybe not take it so seriously. Obviously, it's an American paper, so they maybe see the royal family as just on the same level as like the Kardashians or something. It's just another big group of rich celebrities. The Daily Mail probably want you to be really angry and complain about it, like that's their intention, just to generally be quite furious. And then the last part of the task, I asked you to pick one of the newspapers and then research into who owns it, what kind of values do the owners have, and can we see that in the front page of the papers. So I'd say that if you looked into The Guardian, it's a fairly centre-left newspaper politically. It was once, I'm quoting here, referred to as the organ of the middle class. If you want to insult Guardian readers, you would maybe refer to them as Gardanistas. So the kind of stereotyped Guardian reader is someone who's very politically correct, very earnest in their kind of middle class values. And The Guardian is, like I said before, it's not an anti-royal paper like whatsoever. It's not particularly Republican. But it doesn't really seem to be that passionate about this issue whatsoever. So they feel very kind of neutral on this. They're not always neutral on this, and they're often accused of having a bit more of a kind of left-leaning bias. But in this case, we don't seem to see that from the headlines. The New York Post is owned by News Corp, which is Rupert Murdoch's company. So it's owned by the same people who own The Sun and The Times in the UK. It's very much a tabloid paper. It was taken over by Murdoch and turned into a tabloid, and it was kind of criticised for that in America at the time. So it identifies itself actually as quite a right-wing newspaper, very populist in its politics. It has quite a lurid style, so it wants to kind of shock, be a bit sensationalist, and that's how they get their audiences. And I think we can see that in the front page, this kind of photoshopping the royals onto this kind of crude cartoon, and Megxit is trying to be kind of funny and trying to make people laugh at that. It kind of makes sense that that's how they would operate. The Daily Mail is fairly conservative, small c and big C. It kind of openly supports the Conservative Party in the UK. Its origins, the Daily Mail was quite closely associated when it was originated with the British Union of Fascists. So if you've watched the last series of Peaky Blinders, you might have seen the character Oswald Mosley. Well, he's obviously like a real life figure, I say character. You know what I mean? So Oswald Mosley was part of the BUF, and they were kind of quite supportive of him. So yeah, very kind of right-wing opinioned newspaper, very critical of the BBC. Its reliability is often questioned. It's seen as quite sensationalist as well, and very pro-royal. They've been hugely critical of Harry's decision to marry Meghan, and well, that's how. I mean, it's a mutual thing, but they would have seen it as his choice to sort of marry outside of the sort of accepting he's an American, an actress, all these kind of things that they would have been quite outraged by. And I think you can see that very clearly in the language that they use. Like I said before, fury, we quit. So yeah, they're very pro-royal, and we can see that their real anger is the fact that Harry and Meghan did this, and they didn't tell the Queen or Charles or his brother William. So you can see that. You can see the ideology there. So hopefully from this task, it might, if anything, make you question a little bit more about the kind of the various many factors that can influence a media text. Okay, so as I said, check Teams over the next couple of days for any kind of individualised feedback for the task. If you submitted it there, or if you emailed it to me, I'll post it in there as well. Keep an eye for your next set of work, and also that video where anyone who's struggling to access the feedback on Teams, like I said before, I'm trying to put something together. And if you have any questions that you want to ask me, then fire me an email, and I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. So I hope this was helpful, and I will make another video to go over the next set of tasks as well. Thanks, guys.